Do you think, is it on?
It's on. It's got a green light on there. There you go. You just need the hand back.
You want to wait a minute, or what do you
Yeah, I mean, the people are obviously having trouble with parking.
think?
So we're going to give it a minute. I just wanted to have you ready. Okay.
Hey, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Nice to see you, bud.
You as well.
Glad you're here.
Yeah, you too.
Did you just come from a candidate?
No, I was working. I was down in Massachusetts, so just made it just in time.
Good. Where? Okay. Hey, Jen.
Yeah.
What do they call it? The learning associates? Is this is a function for them?
Yep, the Learning Associates, yeah. And Mary Bannock is sitting here somewhere. She is a Learning Associate. She is. I think she's sitting next to Myra. Samara Hanson. The fourth row back, she's wearing a tan coat.
Oh, yeah.
She's talking, Mary's talking about Carl.
Mary Benson. Huh?
Mary Bannock.
Say again?
Bannock. Banach. Bannock. You know what? I'll walk up with you now. That way it won't be weird. I'll introduce you guys. John's coming. Hey, Bob, how are you?
Yes, I am. And hopefully we'll have a turnout that's reasonable. I know the church would like it. Many in the church would like it.
I agree.
Would you like to say a few words as a learning associate?
No,
Okay.
unless you feel like you need to do that. I feel totally confident here about your ability to introduce yourself.
Yeah, all I'm doing is introducing Lee, and she'll introduce everybody else.
Great, okay, thanks.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. Okay.
Hi, how are you? I'm sorry, my mind is like I said. Is it Mary Bannock?
Yes, Mary Bannock, yeah.
Good to go when you are.
Good afternoon. My name is John Marr, and I'm a member of South Church. And a number of us have been thinking about green burials, and Mary Bannock is a part of the Learning Associates, and this is the organization that is sponsoring this today. We're happy to have you here. We're also happy that it's on Zoom, so that I've already had a few calls of people who felt that they'd like to view it that way. So I would like to, what I would do is, of course. Oh, good. Is this better? You heard everything else, though. You don't want me to repeat anything. Good, that's great. So Lee Webster has been, and Lee is right here beside me, has been educating about green burials and home funerals and funeral reform since 2007. She is the author of Changing Landscapes and several other books on home funerals, and is a frequent lecturer at colleges, universities, and continuing education venues throughout the country. She has founded the New Hampshire Funeral Resources and Education and has worked with several states' national nonprofits, including the Green Burial Council, the Conservation Burial Alliance, and Natural Burial New Hampshire. All of this work informs her writing, speaking, teaching, and advocacy. And at the end of her presentation, she will introduce Sarah Arslanian. I got that right, Sarah? Good. Well then, Lee, I'm going to turn this over to you.
Wonderful, thank you. John did a lot of work to get everybody here, and I'm really excited that we got a good turnout. Thanks for coming. Basically, Halloween. You know, what better time to talk about how we exit the planet but with a little twist? That's the way I like to do it. We do this in a way that leaves a legacy of environmental stewardship and that truly protects land. And I'm hoping that's what you're here to explore with me. We're looking with natural burial to protect land, truly protect land, and to support wildlife and human and plant communities. And we do all this while honoring the family and the community. So today I'm going to walk us through how our funeral choices have changed over the last century or so. So we're going to have a little bit of history you're going to have to sit through. I know history class might not have been on your big list, but we're going to do a little bit of that today. And then we're going to go through some of the, so sort of a trip down memory lane around that, and we're also going to do some snapshots on through an environmental lens, taking a look at the different types of processes that we're using right now and things that are coming up. Because it's really important to understand natural burial. It's important to understand what all the other options are. And when I'm talking about this, obviously I have a preference, but it's up to you to make your own informed decision by knowing more about what those options are. So I also like to tell people that I overload slides. You don't have to read them all. There's not going to be a test. But you will have access to this when we're all done. So when you go afterwards to the New Hampshire Funeral Resources page, at the very top, you're going to see, by tonight, I hope, a place that you can download a PDF of the presentation so you can access all of the data. So you'll get it later. So the first thing, funeral history, I find absolutely fascinating, really funny, a lot of it, very ironic. This book was written by a funeral director from Pennsylvania, and if you want to know all about grave robbing, the graves of presidents and stuff like that, it's all in there. For our purposes, though, we just need to know about 2 disruptive innovations and 1 phenomenon. This is what contributed to making American death practices what they are today. We need to understand that first. So, number 1 disruptive innovation was Abraham Lincoln. This is who got everything started. He loved the idea of embalming. As a matter of fact, the first Union soldier to die during the Civil War was his law clerk, who had gotten totally blitzed at a bar downtown and didn't like the looks of the Confederate flag that they were running, so he got himself up on the roof and took it down and was summarily shot. So they embalmed him. Lincoln made sure that he was embalmed. This is all new technology. It hadn't really happened before, but it by that point became the most important thing that we could do to get those Union soldiers back home again. In fact, many of them had gone to war with a little label stitched inside of their uniforms saying who was going to be embalming them. Imagine sending your child off for that. At any rate, he made sure that all those embalmers who were Civil War surgeons. They made more money embalming than healing anybody. So they were out there, and it was just a crazy thing to do. He made sure that they were licensed, and that was the beginning of the funeral industry. So not only did we have the funeral industry, but we also had embalming. And on the way back to Springfield, on the Lincoln Special, where they stopped at all the places he had stopped on his way to take office, they pulled him out off the train. They kept embalming him 5 times. And millions of people saw him coming through and went and saw his body. And this started the craze for embalming for average people. Here's another one. The second disruptive innovation happened later. This fellow, this is Wilbert Haas. And I always say he looks an awful lot like the guy in the Raiders of the Lost Ark. And the fact is they have a lot in common. This guy was the nephew of a German immigrant who was a concrete magnate. And Wilbert, in 1930, and keep in mind, this is right after the crash, this is after the pandemic, this is Dust Bowl days, it's like all of that turmoil and awfulness. He just takes off to Egypt to see King Tut's tomb, which wasn't open to the public yet, so he was quite the person to get in there and see it. He had this fabulous idea. He came back home and he patented the manufacture of concrete vaults that were lined with asphalt. You know, a need for something that we didn't really need. 30 years before, we had ghouls, grave robbers. They weren't doing it anymore. We had the anatomical acts from all of the states, so it wasn't really happening, but people had a long memory. So in his patent, he said this was going to protect people from ghouls and zombies, right? So 2 things to know. Embalming is a cosmetic procedure. It has no public health or safety benefits at all. The preservation period is typically as long as it takes to have a public viewing in a professional funeral home. Otherwise, it's unnecessary, but it's, it's what people really wanted. So that's how we got there. Vaults these days primarily are used to keep the lawn flat for mowing. I'm not sure about those zombies. I haven't seen any around the cemeteries, so maybe they work after all, but we'd kind of like to get rid of them because they're one of the major issues that we're dealing with having to do with funeral pollution. And I'm not going to go through this whole list, but you can see we're looking at concrete, we're looking at precious metals, we're looking at rainforest woods, hardwoods. Most of it comes from denuding the Amazon forest and shipping all of that wood up here to the US. By the way, it gets here to the eastern seaboard, and then it makes its way to the middle of the country, gets turned into a casket, and then gets sent out. Has an enormous carbon footprint. We're also seeing other things here, herbicides, pesticides, fertilizers, all of those. They have a huge impact on the cemetery workers. The number one thing that cemetery workers have to be concerned about is the use of Roundup. Right? It is responsible for Hodgkin's lymphoma. And cemetery maintenance workers are the ones who have the greatest exposure to it. So we're concerned about them. We've also got all that embalming fluid. We're not too worried about formaldehyde. It off-gasses pretty quickly. But we are concerned about all the other stuff that's in there. Lots of methane, not methane, what's the other stuff? The stuff, your windshield wiper fluid and benzene and all kinds of things like that. So we don't want that in the ground. We're using an awful lot of diesel to mow these lawns and just mow them and mow them and mow them. So I consider these underground warehouses for the dead. There's really not much else we're going to be able to use this land for. All that contributes to what we call cemetery plume. And the point here, you can see this, the little picture at the top, that's sort of an artist's idea of what it might look like underneath there. Here's the key. Worldwide studies on cemeteries have proven that it's not the bodies that cause the plume, it's all the stuff we're putting in. So that's the big concern. So I mentioned we already had 2 disruptive innovations, and now we have the phenomenon. And this was the thing that really put the final nail in the coffin of family-directed care, so to speak. If we go back in time to before the turn of the century, we see that they blamed everything on miasma, right? You probably heard that word before. Dark, smelly, dank air. And they thought that's what caused people to get sick and die. Well, germ theory was in process for years and years, decades and decades. They finally proved it. And instead of making that better, it spurred the first germ panic. And there have been more than one, which was a surprise to me. But, germs, you couldn't see them. And they're everywhere. So all of a sudden, this whole cultural shift changes. No more paper money because you can wash the coins, but you can't really wash the paper. Library books, nobody wanted to touch a book that somebody else had already used. Men's beards got shortened and women's skirts came up. So by the time we're in the 1940s or so, not only have all these changes occurred, but we've sort of finished that whole idea of taking care of our own dead. We are into these bodies, the idea that these bodies are dangerous. I call this the myth of the infectious body. And it is a myth. Every major health organization in the world has statements that will tell you that not only are embalmed bodies, they don't keep you from anything. There's no health issue around that, health and safety, and that dead bodies, as a matter of course, are not dangerous. So that's pretty much, these are some of the things we have to consider when we're starting to talk about natural burial, because part of natural burial is preparing the body for the natural burial and not using invasive processes, not using chemicals, not using materials that don't biodegrade. So someone mentioned this already. Before we can really talk about what the better options are, let's take a look at what some of the entrepreneurs think are good ideas. These have been getting a lot of press. The press loves this stuff. Anything with shock value really gets things going. These sales opportunities, you've probably seen them, many of them. I'm just going to point out 4 so that you get an idea what we're talking about when we talk about greenwashing and talking about doing your due diligence before you participate in this. So here's one. These are called burial pods, and they are made of, the company tells us, biodegradable plastic. They look like full-body eggs, right, that are going to grow a tree on top of them because of this artist's rendering. They aren't for full bodies. These are cremation urns. This was just a way to get attention for the company. There is not a sexton alive who is going to receive this egg and try to get it into a grave. Just basic stuff. I mean, we're trying to bury at a really good level. I don't know how deep you'd have to go for this, but I don't want to be the person trying to carry it around the cemetery, and neither do they. Here's another one, the mushroom suit. Anybody heard about this before? I'm sure. Yeah, it sounded like a great idea when I first heard it. I thought, oh, great deal. The idea was to inoculate a suit with mushroom spores. First they started with shiitake and then realized that was a waste of a good dinner. So they went with mycelium, just this stuff that's in the leaf litter. Well, if it's in the leaf litter. If it's not in the leaf litter already, then what are you putting it 4 feet down for? If it's not there already, then it becomes an invasive plant. All of these ideas became, were swirling around the natural burial community. And then we had an academic study that was done in Texas. They walked away from it before they even got halfway through. There was absolutely no activity. The company is defunct after making a lot of money. This is an interesting one. We have to discern when we're looking at products. This casket is beautiful. It's wicker. It's fully biodegradable. Lovely. It was also made in Indonesia, and it may well have been made by tiny hands or forced labor. We don't know. And it's made its way all the way around the world to get to us. So we need to be thinking about the footprint and the things we don't know as we're making choices. This is representative of Memorial Forests. You may have heard of those too. They've got lots of big bucks, lots of Silicon Valley venture capitalist money that started this idea that you could pay this group to scatter cremated remains, not full bodies, just cremated remains, around a tree or under a tree for about $24,000 a person. By the way, it's free to scatter and legally fine to scatter cremated remains anywhere as long as you have landowner permission. But this was a way these companies have started, and they're trying to purchase this land and get people to, promising people that they're going to have this land forever. The problem is that they are not designated as cemeteries. There's nothing protecting that land. It can be turned over at any time. And those investors have pulled their money out. So these organizations now are nonprofits. They've reduced the price, but it's still a price. So these are some of the things you have to really pay attention to, okay? They sound great. They're co-opting the language of conservation, but look at the fine print. Here's another thing that we're trying to address in the natural burial community, and that is funeral poverty. During the last prior administration, in 2023, the U.S. Federal Reserve reported that 63% of all Americans can't afford a $400 unexpected expense. $400 for your typical funeral here in New Hampshire that is going to cost about $9,000. It's anywhere between $8,000 and $18,000 countrywide. Even a direct cremation at about $2,100 to $2,500 is out of reach for most people. 10 states in the U.S. legally compel families to hire a funeral director, whether they can afford it or not, to do certain aspects of funeral, all the different things that have to happen. Fortunately, here in New Hampshire, we are one of the 40 that live free and die. So this is something that we're very concerned about. These are social justice issues. These are things that really we need to be paying attention to as we're changing the model of the way that we care for bodies after death and determine what kind of disposition they're going to have. We need to be watching for things like this, simple things like pricing. What are we basing the pricing on? And getting real about it. So we need to look at cremation. There are 3 types of cremation, which may surprise you. We're going to go through those really quickly. Flame cremation we're pretty used to. Lots of people choose this because they think it's less expensive, and we'll look at that. They also think it's more it's uncomplicated, it's convenient, and I can't argue with that. But I'm also very much involved with the home funeral movement. And those are people all over the country, a groundswell of people who are starting to realize we've been so distanced from death for so long that we have lost something essential, both in our family culture and our community culture. We want more connection, not less. A lot of people are stepping back from cremation, particularly when they learn about natural burial. We call them these cremation conversions. I kind of like that phrase. Here's another thing. A lot of people are going to choose cremation because they want to save land. That's what they'll tell you. And I've been a conservationist since I was 14 years old, my first trip with the Sierra Club, and I can tell you that we don't save land unless we actually save it. We buy it, we steward it, we monitor it, we care for it. So skirting the issue isn't going to do the job. When we're talking about natural burial, we're getting right to the heart of that. Flame cremation consumes a tremendous amount of fossil fuels. It emits mercury. About 14% of the mercury that goes down into our waterways is attributable to cremation stacks. Lots of greenhouse gases per person as a result of this. The final product is about 6 or 7 pounds to 10 pounds or so, depends. But what it is calcium phosphate and sodium. It's not ashes. Okay, we all use that phrase. I'm very careful not to use that. I'm also really careful not to use the phrase cremains. I've had multiple funeral directors come up to me and say, that's disrespectful. I thought, well, it's just sort of popular vernacular, but okay. But cremated remains are too alkaline, too sweet to support plant life or root life. So again, when we're back in that memorial forest and we're dousing this stuff all around the roots, we're going to be causing a real problem. We're going to be creating issues for microbial communities too if we put it in the ground. So we're looking at girdling trees, and we're looking at phosphorus runoff if we dump it. I mean, these gentlemen are dumping this stuff on a fragile alpine area. Enough of it in quantity can cause phosphorus runoff, very much like fertilizer running off from farms into waterways that causes marine life problems. You name it, this is the same thing. A couple years ago, I was part of a group that stopped one of these memorial forests. They were going to be putting 10,000 cremated remains per acre on a piece of land that would have rolled right down into the town's reservoir. And the town was this close to approving it because they didn't understand this simple fact. So these are the things we need to pay attention to. Alkaline hydrolysis is an interesting process. It's a little greener than flame cremation. It's not legal here in New Hampshire. It was for about 5 minutes in 2013, and then by 2014, it was illegal again. This is a process that's been used for medical waste for a very long time, but now we're using it for full humans. And you can see it's a very industrial process. This is the unit, and it uses warm water under pressure and lye. So with flame cremation, we're incinerating soft tissue from the bone. With this way, we're dissolving it. What that means is that because we're not burning up a whole lot of bone, it means we're going to have more bone left over. We're going to have about 10 to 15 pounds per person of bone, plus up to 300 gallons of effluent. And the only place that effluent can go, because the EPA and the USDA want nothing to do with this, is into your wastewater treatment plant. And it does a really good job of taking care of it. But it's load on taxpayer infrastructure, so you want to think about that. It does neutralize cytotoxins and embalming fluid, so that's helpful. Mercury is captured, but that's pretty much the best part of it. It's not green burial, it gets called that in the media. There's no burial involved here unless you're putting those in the ground like you would flame cremation. The big one that gets a lot of hype, everybody thinks this is pretty great, is human composting. It's legal now in 14 states. It's only available in 4. Mostly, this is a highly industrial process, happens in an industrial park, in a warehouse of some kind, and I'll show you pictures of that. The medium is feedstock bulking agents, okay? So it's gonna be straw and wood chips and alfalfa. And you go, oh, well, that sounds just like my garden compost, you know? That's not too bad. Alfalfa is grown in the US in the Four Corners region, in the Colorado River Basin. And 86% of the water that is being drained out of the Colorado River Basin in the middle of this historic drought goes toward livestock irrigation. 34% of that goes toward growing alfalfa. Oh, and here's another piece. That land's being bought up by Middle Eastern countries, the water rights to that land. So a lot of that alfalfa is actually leaving the US and going to the Middle East. A lot of it then is also going to these, being transported to these types of human composting facilities. So again, big natural resources drain, really big footprint. So be concerned about that. It takes a couple of months to do this, so it's sort of a boutique disposition method. It's not going to happen overnight. Halfway through, the bones are going to be removed, they're going to be pulverized, chopped up, and then put back in the mix. So that high alkalinity, that 2,000 times too high to grow plants. That's what's going back in. Final product, we've just gone from pounds to cubic yards. When Vermont did their, legalized this a few years ago, they sent me the draft bill, and I took a look at it, and I think I snorted right through my nose when I saw the line that said, anyone who doesn't pick up the remains will be taken to the medical examiner's office and stored for 2 years. And I was picturing this dump truck backing up, beep, 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 to the medical examiner's office at the medical center in Burlington, and what they were going to do with this stuff for 2 years. A cubic yard and a half is a whole truckload of material. So that becomes the real question. And if you look at this picture, you can see, and I've brought some for you, you can look at it in real life. On the top, I've got potting soil. In the middle is my kitchen compost. You can see a little eggshell in there. On the bottom, that's human compost. That's not soil. That's unfinished wood chips. So here's a closer look. This is where they do the ceremonial space. And that's great. If they do a fabulous job, it looks really nice. You go into this sort of beehive kind of enclosure, and then you go out the backside to where the actual composting takes place in these lockers. And these are humidity and temperature controlled. It's highly technical. They do a terrific job. And a couple months later, we're ready. And it's being taken about an hour outside of Seattle and spread on open fields. This is not green burial. There is no burial involved. In fact, cemeteries are saying no to this. They might take a small portion, similar, equivalent to, in fact, we have 3 green burial sites, pilot sites of the U.S. Veterans Administration around the country. And what they will accept is an amount commensurate with a flame cremation, so that about 10 pounds. What do we do with the rest of it? Well, you can put it in your garden. It's perfectly safe. We believe the reason cemeteries don't want anything to do with it, though, is that we don't know what the PFAS quotient is. We aren't going to know that for a very long time. There's no way to establish that right now. Other things are mediated, as you would expect, the same way that they are in the ground, and soil does the job. But bringing it all out by truckload and dumping it is kind of a problem. That's the multi-million-dollar facility. This is the way that it gets done in Colorado and out in the woods in Washington State. This is a plywood cradle with a hand crank. Does the same job, does it just as well. But again, no burial involved. And I'm thinking New Hampshire, probably the cradle with the hand crank. Quick thing to think about. We started with flame cremation and moved our way up. It takes longer, it costs more. Sort of basic economics 101. So when you take a look at this, we'll compare that to natural burial in a minute. Gives you a different feel for it. When you have an emergency like we did with COVID, we need quick solutions. A one and done solution, not something that's going to take long periods of time. But the sort of the gold standard around making this assessment, making this informed decision about which of these processes you're interested in, is carbon emissions. If we start down in the lower right, conventional burial using a concrete vault is over 1,800 pounds of carbon that's emitted for each one. All right, so that's just the start. You keep on going and you look at alkaline hydrolysis, 150 pounds per person. Flame cremation, over 500 probably. Human composting, again, we don't know because we can't determine exactly how much is emitted from a truckload from New Mexico up to Seattle, that type of thing. We'll wait and see what that looks like. Natural burial, though, I can tell you without any qualms at all, is the only disposition method that actually sequesters carbon and nitrogen and potassium and phosphorus. So natural burial makes the most sense if you're looking at it through this particular lens. Which finally brings us to natural burial. It's simply body to earth burial without any impediment. It's basically what you can see here. It's 3.5 to 4 feet is the optimum depth. That's where all the juicy microbes and all the coffin beetles and all those guys live. They're going to do the best job. It might surprise you to learn that 4 feet, that probably sounds shallow to you. There are only 2 states in the U.S. that require anything deeper than 4 feet, and that's 5 feet. I always tell people 6 feet is like a John Wayne movie. So 4 feet is normal. That's what we use anyway. We don't use a vault. And if you go to a cemetery and they say, oh, yeah, we're a green cemetery, but you'll have to have a vault, we'll just turn it over. That's called butter dishing, and that is called greenwashing. So be sure you know. We're not using any of those rainforest woods or metals, nothing plastic, no synthetic fabrics on the inside. And we're encouraging people to simply clean and cool the body where there's no reason for invasive procedures. So with all of those things into account, you can see we've simplified it, and it just sounds so boring, and I've been telling people for years we got to find a way to make this sexier. So if you have any ideas, you let me know. I think this is pretty sexy. I did a survey this last spring of all of the green cemeteries in New Hampshire, and the average price of a plot is $360. Now, we just looked at all those other numbers. I think you can see this is pretty reasonable. The $50, by the way, up in Benton Flats, up near Haverhill, they just raised their price from $10 to $50. So in some rural areas, you're going to find that the plot price is going to be less expensive. If you go into more urban areas, it's going to be more expensive. You might also be, if you're looking at a cemetery that's affiliated with a conservation land trust, there may be a higher price, but the purpose of that is that half of that money is going to be going to the land trust to further land acquisition and to fund restoration projects. So look at the fine print on the pricing. Don't just go by, that one's cheaper, I'll take it. I like to show people this. I think it's really helpful to sort of see what the grave itself looks like. One thing we do is take all the soil out by strata. So we want to keep the upper horizon microbial community together, and then the next. And when we put it back in, we put it back in the reverse order. Little bit of help. We're going to be following all those other rules. We've got, once the body, the shrouded body or the casket is in the ground at about 3.5 to 4 feet, you're going to have an 18 to 24-inch smell barrier, is what we call it. Animals can't smell that deep. Humans have notoriously terrible schnozzes, so there's no way we can smell this. But animals won't get anywhere near this. They aren't interested, they can't smell it. They much prefer live prey. So that gives us what we need. Then we mound over the top, so it's perfectly safe. Biomass, what you can see in the bottom. We're going to see several instances of biomass. The idea is to put in some kind of natural organic material that is going to act as an oxygen trap. And we like water in the grave. We like the oxygen in the grave. It helps with the natural decomposition process. It also means that when we put someone in, they're landing in a lovely bed, something that's quiet. Again, animals aren't interested. Winter burials are common. We always used to bury in winter. It's not that difficult. We used to put, somebody out in the barn. The neighborhood had a set of sawhorses, and everybody would sort of trade them up for who needed them and go barn to barn. These days, we don't even need to do that. We can remove snow, we can thaw through the frost layer and simply dig. And we're only going to 3.5 to 4 feet, so it's not as difficult as it would be if you were doing a full dig. Water is not contaminated by any of this. Our aquifers are down 75, 85 feet. what we know, and we're about to begin a new study with the University of Tennessee, with the body farm there. You ever heard of that? We're working with them on determining what the soil changes and the moisture changes are around different types of graves in different cemeteries around the country. We just put in for some funding for that. So we'll know more, but what we already do know is good enough. Water doesn't get contaminated by bodies. It doesn't go anywhere. And if it does, it's going to go through soil, and soil is the best filter known to man. So we're good. Titanium knees, everybody's worried, what about my knee, what about my hip? And I always tell people, no problem. It's non-leaching. So we're going to let that go. And in, a bazillion years, if somebody finds it, fine. I'm also not going to cut the flies out of your pants, so you're good with that too. People first. And the last question people have is about pathogens, right? What about germs? Back to germs. And what we know is that here in the US, either they're no longer present, right? Because once the host dies, the virus or the pathogen is going to die. We have a couple things like a hepatitis that might last about 5 to 7 days, but even after that, we're done. But we don't have hemorrhagic fevers and all that. If we have Creutzfeldt-Jakob, right, the brain prion disease, that is the worst thing we can do is put it in a crematory and have it go up the stacks, right? So burial is the option. Okay, so I want to talk about different types of cemeteries. A lot of people like the idea of burying on their own property, and that is doable right here in New Hampshire. It needs to be for family members only. Now, the way that the state describes family members is enough so that if you have a life partner, you can pretty much squeeze in there. And there are no funeral police to come and catch you, but I don't recommend just inviting your neighbor over for a whopping amount of money. They need to use their own property. What you have to do is record that with the municipal cemetery trustees, and at the point where you sell the property, you want to get this written on the deed. It's a real estate full disclosure process. And along with that, you're going to write on a piece of paper, you want to put a right of way. So it's, X is where you park your car, ... where you drive, and, there's where people in the future can come and visit that grave without getting shot for trespassing. That's the idea. Setbacks just include 50 feet from known waterways and state highways and 100 feet from buildings, schools, things like that. That's pretty easy. We don't have a lot of zoning ordinances in New Hampshire, but you want to check and make sure to see that if they do include burial, that it is still permissible. And the big question that people ask me all the time is, won't this impact my real estate value of my home? And lucky for us, the real estate industry has taken upon themselves to study this, and they have realized that no, it in fact doesn't change very much about reselling land. The price is probably going to stay the same. It's going to go up if it goes up. The only difference that they remarked on is that it might take you up to 2 months longer to sell your property, but that's because you're waiting for that person who wants to come in and go, oh, look at my new dead relatives. I can be buried there too. So we just, it's all good. So the Green Burial Council is 20 years old now, and the whole purpose of starting the council was to try to eliminate greenwashing, get ahead of it, make sure nobody was going to take advantage of this. And in doing so, what we did was design standards that we would base our certification on. We have 3 sets of standards. The first one is for hybrid cemeteries, and that's your local municipal cemetery that continues to bury with a vault someplace and then other places without. Or they might integrate burials, green burials, among the vault burials. Churches also, those tend to be hybrid burial grounds. Then we have natural burial grounds, and they are simply cemeteries that follow all the rules that we just talked about. No vaults, no rainforest wood, no metal, all that kind of good stuff. And more of these are popping up. This is what we're working on getting going right here in New Hampshire. Conservation level cemeteries, there are only a few of them because it's very difficult to go this extra step, which is why memorial forests seem so silly to me. You know, people are buying, oh yeah, great, it's conservation land when there's no actual land trust doing anything. We're looking to partner with real land trusts to put easements or other types of protective instruments on this land where we're burying in a natural cemetery. And the purpose for that is to have that added layer of protection for that land. Being a cemetery doesn't mean that the cemetery won't get moved. I think that's been happening since the beginning of time. Putting an easement on it means it is protected for eternity. So here's a list of New Hampshire cemeteries right now, so you know that there is a precedent for them. These have been popping up. I'm going to have, I think within the next couple months, at least 2 more, maybe 4. I go in and work with cemetery trustees from all over the state, like Michigan, you name it. People call me to do this. And I walk them through the process of adding green burial options to hybrid cemeteries. This is important for a very good reason. Most people are concerned about a sense of place. They really want to be buried in a place where people who love them associate them with. Or perhaps they want to be buried in a place where their family has already been buried. So it isn't just a question of, I'm going to make this decision about where I'm buried only on this criteria. There's a lot of criteria. This is part of it. So thing to know about this is that the state of New Hampshire requires that every town provide burial space for its own citizens, but it doesn't mean that they're open to anyone from outside of that town. The only one on this list that accepts people from outside of its town is West Lebanon, and they're filling up quick. So that it behooves us to have land right in our own towns that is available. So who owns the cemetery? This is an interesting little piece, little nugget to know. Funeral directors in New Hampshire are not allowed to own or operate cemeteries. So if you think it's their fault we haven't gotten this put together yet, then you're barking up the wrong tree. It's up to us to get these started. We either go to our elected, and we elect them, our trustees or selectmen in some towns, and we ask them to make this available. We ask them to relax the vault requirement, or something to help them understand that you want other options. If you don't get anywhere, run for office yourself, right? I mean, we vote them in every March and then we walk away from them and go, okay, not it, your problem. Well, we want it to be our problem. We want to make sure that this is available when we're ready for it. All New Hampshire cemeteries are nonprofits. And this will be, the reason I'm mentioning this is going to be very important soon. Hold that thought. Even though you might get a deed when you purchase a plot in a cemetery, you need to understand that what you're actually buying is the right to be buried there. You do not own real estate for eternity. Americans. We all seem to have this idea that we can own things for eternity. The fact is that if we're buried without a vault and without a metal casket or anything else, and our body becomes soil, the cemetery owns the soil. This is legal precedent that has been set for centuries now. So what that means for natural burial cemeteries is that if you want to be buried there, you want to become soil, and you want to promote a truly sustainable way of exiting the planet without exiting the planet, then your soil in deep time, 500 years, whenever, can be reused. And I think that that's just one more little, not all cemeteries are doing it, not all cemeteries are offering it, but some are. The metal, fine. Baby steps, right? But in natural and conservation level cemeteries, you're going to have a different experience. We're likely going to be meeting at the gate at the beginning, and the pallbearers are going to be anybody who's in the funeral party who feels capable of carrying, and we're going to walk often walk the deceased in, it means that we're bringing back old-fashioned processions, essentially, right? Processions were a really big deal in colonial America, and here's why. About 90% of the amount that a family spent on a funeral went to liquor. And it was to get everybody in town liquored up and partying so they could stay awake all night for the wake, right? To make sure that the person who's died was really dead, because they didn't have any medical way of knowing that. Well, by the morning, these people were so blitzed that they couldn't figure out, which side of the road they were on. Their job then was to sober up on the long walk, carrying the dead to the cemetery. We're doing that now with a little different emphasis, mostly on bringing music and readings and poetry and all that. We can stop on the way, sort of stations on the way till we get to the grave space. Give everybody a chance to participate, get everybody a chance to carry. We forget that grief is physical, not just emotional or spiritual, and that for many people, that ability to do something is the most healing thing that they can do. The procession gives us an opportunity to start with that. For people who are mobility challenged, we are trying to make sure that we're addressing their needs too. So we've got electric golf carts with trailers. We have technical students in high schools building us mobile beers so that we can get people in. Not everybody's got a burro, but we're trying to put together really well-maintained trails, ADA-compliant trails, so that we increase mobility and make sure everyone, particularly people who have not felt comfortable in nature or felt welcomed in nature, we finding better ways to include them. When you get there to the grave, it's going to be prepared already. You can see in the middle picture, we've got some biomass, looks different from the other picture. On the right, you can see we're going to be putting wide planks on the side. That will avoid grave subsidence, right, falling in. It's only 3.5 to 4 feet, so it's not going to go all that far. But this creates stability for the pallbearers to stand. You can see there are rails and ropes, and what happens is that when the casket or the shrouding board goes on that, then the ropes lift, someone pulls the rails out, and the body is lowered. There are other ways of lowering too. You can start at the top of the grave and walk your way in. I found that to be pretty efficient and comfortable. And again, not going all that deep, don't have to worry too much about our backs, but we do make sure we've got plenty of support. There's nothing about natural burial that would preclude a ceremony, just as you're used to. So we're going to still rely on funeral directors and musicians and clergy and celebrants, all the people who are essential in making sure that funerals work the way they do. Full military honors are especially moving out in this environment. So another thing is that when people are out in nature and they're together in this way, they tend to be a little bit more spontaneous, a little bit more willing to participate. They're happy to be led, but I can tell you that for a lot of people that's experiencing this death and nature, making the connection between death and nature is profound for many people. Once it's time to close the grave, we're going to do another biomass. Of this one, we're sort of cocooning. We're going to put it over the top. We call this blanketing. And here in New England, pine boughs are going to work just fine. We have lots of shovels because we want everybody to participate if they want to. And you'll notice we have some nice small shovels too, because children really need to be part of this process, and boy, do they love it. I mean, they'll pick it up, like this little girl. This is the granddaughter of a Vietnam vet that we're burying. And she's in her little pink tutu and her rain boots, and she grabbed a hold of that shovel and didn't let go. This was essential to her. It's like they can intuit this is the last thing they can do for a person that they loved. And a lot of people will say afterwards, they'll say, I didn't know what to expect. I had no idea. I thought this was crazy. The most important thing to me was to be able to roll up my sleeves and put some dirt in that grave. That's what really sticks with people. All the soil stays. We don't take it away. We're going to mound it up. It's probably going to take a couple of months for it to flatten down. Some I've done, if we had a shroud, using a shroud, and we've got a pretty small person, we don't even have a mound at all. But what we're going to do is cover up that loose soil. We're going to put some kind of material on it. They're using hothouse flowers and garden flowers, and that's fine. We want to do that in case there's a weather event that would erode the top of the mound. But any fresh flowers are going to be removed by staff. What we'll probably be doing is introducing native species over the top of the grave. So we're doing restoration work here. Any kind of ground coverings and all that kind of stuff. Or just walk away and let grass do what it does, and we all know what grass does. So this is a more natural way to leave the grave. But we're not done. We're going to do something that marks the spot. Now, a lot of people have said to me, oh, that green burial thing, yeah, that's where you just sort of dig a hole in the woods and then you don't do anything else. You just walk away. How do you find them, they say. I say, well, we have quite a few ways to do it. First of all, we're not dumping them and leaving them there. We're using GPS systems so that we can record exactly where the burial is. We can access that in a lot of different ways, which is fantastic for genealogical purposes and for record keeping. That's great. It doesn't take the place of paper. We're still using that. But it's not a memorial solution. The memorial solution is using native rock, native stone. We try to find things that are at least on the property or nearby the property, if we possibly can. My men in my family were all stone cutters in Barre, Vermont, in Rock of Ages. And I was doing a talk there one time a few years ago, and this young guy was watching me, and we get to, I'm talking about, don't buy the great big granite markers. I said, just, local stone. And we get all done, and he pulls his lapel over, and it says Rock of Ages on it. And I said, oh, you're good. It's local. So that's what we're looking for. Here's the thing. A stone doesn't do the whole job anymore. Grave rubbings, some of that stuff is now illegal in some cemeteries. What we're using, and this is really important for us to replenish the interest in cemeteries with younger people, we're starting to use technology. And this came out of Mel Bennett, who is the person who started the Life Forest down in Hillsborough. It's just for cremated remains. It's not for full body burial. But she came up with this great idea that you would put QR codes on every grave. And then the family could upload videos and pictures and poems and music so that when you go to the grave to visit, you do a quick snapshot and up comes the life of this person. And this is starting to capture the interest of those family members and people who come to visit, and they come back. This is one of the things we've learned with natural burial too. People don't just come for Veterans Day or Memorial Day. They come back frequently, and they meet each other. The mourners meet each other, and they create more community, and that's fascinating. Some of it is tied to this. Some other things we are doing here very intentionally, lots of permanent and temporary art installations, cenotaphs, memorial walls, all kinds of things. We're trying to increase memorialization, not eliminate it. Lots of things are happening in these cemeteries. Again, I talked about them being warehouses for the dead. That's not what's happening here. What happens when someone dies and they purchase that burial right, all of that goes to supporting life-affirming activities up above ground. And we're finding that more people, not only are they coming back, meeting each other, they're coming to do things like dog parties. Congressional Cemetery in DC have been hosting dog parties in the green section for years now. Here in Pennsylvania, we're doing goat yoga and solstice events and concerts and gardening and bird watching and family picnics and all kinds of life cycle events, baby baptisms and weddings. So these are places that are full and alive and build community. So we have greater missions than just, oh, where can we bury the body? We do more there too. We do an awful lot having to do with supporting agricultural processes and businesses even, educational teaching, research projects, nurseries. A lot of these cemeteries are building their own nurseries, so they're propagating native plants that can be used in the cemetery and on the graves. So we're cutting out the big loop of like South American, hothouse flowers and stuff, but we're increasing the amount of native restoration that we can do. I've been talking about caskets. We'll just look at those really briefly. Biodegradable caskets come in a lot of different forms. There's a big change in the craft movement. A lot of crafters are starting to make funerary objects. Among those are reviving the ancient art of casket weaving. And certainly a pine box always works, or found materials. You can make them of anything that's fully biodegradable. Shrouds can be made from just about anything. I had I think at the time, $4 100% cotton sheet that I used as a shroud for my mom, and it was absolutely beautiful, and she was such a cheapskate. She would have absolutely adored it. You can see, in the middle picture, you can see that's a shrouding board that's underneath there. We do need stability for shrouds. I had a gentleman who World War II vet, who wanted to be buried in his army blanket. By this time, it was pretty threadbare. So we had to put a board, just put a board under, but he got his wish. That was pretty moving. So shrouds are fine. This organization, this is the Funerary Artisans Collective. I started this a while ago for local sort of New England artists who make these materials, and then it got around the country, and now it's getting around the world. So we're seeking craftsmen and artists. People want to shop local. What a great way to do it. If you're using a funeral home, they can't penalize you for bringing in your own. You just want to make sure that it is the right specifications for a crematory or a cemetery. But funeral directors will be fine with that. The federal government makes sure of that. New Hampshire Funeral Resources is, I started this back in 2007, I think, when I started doing this work. And basically what this is for is to help you figure out how to care for your own dead, or how to work with funeral directors, which is called a blended funeral. So it's got all kinds of how-to information all the way down the line to help you do these. It's also under green burial. You're going to find lots and lots of resources there, particular to New Hampshire, most of it, except for one list, which is the green burial cemeteries in the US and Canada. And last night at 10 o'clock, I added the 499th cemetery that I know of to this list that's used by all the nonprofits around the country. All the media uses this list. So go there if you want that kind of information. And now we've got another organization we just started this year. And this is Natural Burial New Hampshire. And I have two of my board members here. You already know Sarah, she's a board member. And I also have Marcia Campanello, who's going to walk you through what we're doing with Natural Burial New Hampshire.
Thanks, Lee. Good afternoon, everybody. I have a quick change of people here. And always a hard act to follow Lee and all the wonderful information that she's been giving. But it's really important to us at this point to talk to you about this Natural Burial New Hampshire. It is a statewide educational and charitable nonprofit formed to raise awareness and funds to support both green burial education and the formation of independent natural burial grounds throughout the state. And you can learn more about it at Natural Burial NH. Whether your interest lies in private natural burial ground on your own property, or supporting your municipal cemetery trustees in making natural burials available in your community, pursuing a conservation easement that allows natural burials, or creating a nonprofit natural burial cemetery yourself, tapping our website will get you started with a plethora of information. I mean, truly an amazing amount. This mic definitely changes no matter where you hold this. Sorry about that. Right now, there are 7 potential projects in New Hampshire, 6 in the talking stages, and 1 already underway in Grafton County. This is huge. This is new. This is a year of true movement in the natural burial world. We're confident that once we have one up and running, others will also open, giving people choices in their own regions. So here to talk about what's happening right here on the Seacoast is Sarah Oslanian, another member of the NBNH board and the driving force behind the effort to bring natural burial to the Seacoast. So Sarah, thank you.
And I'll just talk for a few minutes, and then we'll have time for questions and answers. So I'm Sarah Arslanian. I live in Stratham, and I'm a caregiver and death doula. And in 2023, in the summer, I was playing volleyball with a funeral director, and she said, "You're a death doula. You should start a green burial cemetery. People ask us about it all the time, and we have nothing to tell them." And I thought it was just an obscure interest of mine, but I started exploring, and there's been so much interest in the Seacoast. I took Lee's master class. I toured all the green burial cemeteries in New England, and I learned that to run a cemetery, you have to be a nonprofit, so I started a nonprofit. And one of our board members is here, Bob Vaccaro, right there, if you want, nice. We incorporated in early 2024. We're 501c13. We just got our IRS designation, which is exciting. So now we can start fundraising. We could buy land when we find the right piece of land. Our mission is to support green burial in the Seacoast by establishing natural burial cemeteries and by educating events like this. What we've done so far, we just graduated from Good Works' year-and-a-half nonprofit incubator program, which was incredible. If you don't know Good Work, you should familiarize yourself. They're a group that supports starting nonprofits. We've done lots of community outreach, lots of collaborations. Funeral homes want to partner because they think green burial is the future and they want to be a part of that. Soil scientists at UNH want to study this cemetery and be a part of picking the site and the soil. And we've had meetings with municipalities helping them transition to hybrid. Our vision, natural burial grounds with mostly wildflower meadow. We love that aesthetic. Multiple Seacoast locations would be lovely. We'll see what happens, but Seacoast is huge. One northern would be nice, one like a little western. And we would love to partner with local artisans. We've found a few already, but if you know anyone, connect them with me. Pine coffins, shrouds. We want the cemetery to be very community-led. The people that are choosing that option can help us shape it in a way that aligns with us, and then also offer lots of those nice community offerings that Lee mentioned. So if you like this idea and would love to see this be an option in the Seacoast, feel free to help us. The biggest hurdle is finding the right piece of land for the cemetery. What we're looking for is like 2 to 3 acres for burial would be adequate. More is fine also, but as long as it's in a rural setting, so woods around, conservation land around, maybe it's nice to have trails to walk when you're spending time at the cemetery. Ideally, like accessible to the Seacoast, and wet soil is not a good fit with decomposing bodies, so it can't be a very wet piece of property for the burial area. So takeaways, just be an informed consumer, whatever choices you're making that align with you for the end of life. And then if you want to see this in the Seacoast, help us. Up here, here's an email sign-up sheet if you want to stay up to date on the local progress. And then here's a sign-up sheet if you're interested in the statewide nonprofit group. And then this green flyer here has all of my contact information, the green one, and is the website of the local effort. And then lots of good resources up here about everything, so come up and take a look. All right. Thank you for coming. Yep, questions? Yes.
You said there are some cemeteries right now that are setting aside
Good, thank you.
area for green burials. Are there some in the local area?
In the Seacoast, Calvary Cemetery in Newmarket is hybrid. So it's a conventional cemetery, but they have some plots that they allow green burial. And that's open to any resident and it's a Catholic cemetery, but any religion. And then Kensington Municipal Cemeteries allow green burial, but that's just for Kensington residents. And that's all in the Seacoast. Yes. Brad? You're good?
Is that?
Now you're focused in New Hampshire. What can we look for in Maine?
So in Maine, there's a nice one called Cedar Brook in Leamington, Maine. It's about an hour, maybe hour and 15 from here. And then there's another which actually just stopped accepting new people. They filled up in 5 years, but they were further north in Maine. So Leamington would be a good option in Maine. And I'm sure there's also hybrid ones in Maine too, but I don't know which ones allow. Wow. Yeah. Do they allow non-residents, do you know? I don't believe so. Okay, Leamington, Cedar Brook.
There's
Yeah.
a group up in the Rockland-Camden area.
We need the mic.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
There's a group in the Rockland and Camden area that I've been working with for quite a while, and they just got word last week that there is 1 acre available in the town of Warren, Maine, for green burial. They're looking to do a much bigger project, but it's a start. But Maine's trying. We're not quite there. Yeah, is a Jewish burial considered a green burial? This is a really great question. The Jewish, Muslim, and Quaker traditions, actually, if you get into the Christian tradition, into Russian Orthodoxy, and a couple other different groups, it was typical to not use a vault, to always bury naturally. Unfortunately, over time, the powers that be decided that this vault thing, if everybody else was doing it, we should do it too. So one of the courses that I teach with 2 Jewish scholars is about bringing back Jewish traditional, real traditional burial, and trying to salvage some of these cemeteries to bring back that tradition. But essentially, this isn't just Jewish or Muslim or anything else. This is an American tradition. That's why I give you the history at the beginning, so that you can see we always used to do this in a natural way. We're just going back to doing it that way with a little more red tape. Yeah.
Oh, coming to you.
Green burial would seem to have potentially a couple of leftovers. My fillings, for one thing, which is supposed to have some mercury in it, and my hip, if it happens to have been replaced. Tell me about that and my ground.
Yes, well, I'm not going to remove your fillings, and I'm not going to remove your hip. So we're going to let those go. The fillings is interesting. I have had to explain and actually bring in that Minnesota report to my dentist to explain why I want to replace all those amalgam fillings, just in the event that some crazy thing happens and I have to be cremated. Same thing for burial. I don't want that in the ground. But these days, we're the last of the people who have amalgam fillings. We're not worried. None of that is leaching. It's the leaching piece that is the problem. Your hip, your knee, those aren't going to leach either. So that's it. I even did a study one time, my dentist helped me do this, to find out how much gold was in each tooth, because I had someone in an audience say, oh, those funeral directors must be stealing the gold out of people's teeth before all of this, which is absolutely not true. That's not what they do. But it wouldn't be worth it to anybody to dig up your grave to get your teeth out of there if you've got gold in it.
So it sounds to me like there are limitations on land and availability. If one is to plan in advance, what do you do?
Plan in advance for
green burial.
For any green burial in a public space.
Yes.
Yeah, I wanted to be sure that we were talking about the same thing. Well, you're keeping an eye on our lists and on Sarah's group. That's why we've got the sign-up sheets. We want to be sure we're bringing people along with us so that they know what's available and how soon it's available. It doesn't work any differently from any other cemetery. You can buy your burial right and have it with your, here's an important piece. All of this may be a little different from what the people who are going to manage that for you are used to. So write it all down and have the conversation. Then put all that with your advance directives and put a copy in your freezer. The reason you're putting it in your freezer is that they'll remember that it's in the freezer. We used to, my father-in-law lived to be 102, and every time we went to visit, which was once a month at least, he walked us through the entire process of where all of his stuff was so that we could do it. Do you think it was there when we wanted it? I said, geez, I hope he put it in the freezer. Sure enough, he'd listened to me at one time. It makes all the difference for people, being included in the conversation so they understand, anything that's a little bit off, like not hiring a funeral director or, or wanting to be buried in a different cemetery, is going to throw them off. Let's make this as easy as we can for them. Anything else? Okay, well, we got lots of good stuff for you to take home. Thanks for coming.